And hello, everybody. This is Corey with The Abundant Artist, and I am here with artist Jennifer Price Davis from Ohio. Hi, Jen.
Hello.
Thanks so much for joining us today. And thank you, everybody who was waiting on standby. We appreciate you just had some technical difficulties, but we are here and ready to go. So, Jen, I asked a few weeks ago for some audience recommendations. Mm-hmm. And several of our artists asked if we could have you on. Wow. And I went and looked at the 100 Angel series, and I loved it. It's a great idea. It is. I think a lot of artists make sort of angel art and the sort of positive angel messaging, but yours is a little bit different. Because all the girls in that, all the angels are little girls or young girls, and they're all Black, right?
Mm-hmm. Yes.
So tell us a little bit about how you got to where you are as an artist, and a little bit about your background.
Okay. So I would say that I started out when I was a little girl, probably about 5 years old, and I would paint with my sister and put 5 cents on the corner of my pictures. So I kind of always had this sense that my art was meant to be purchased by other people. And went on to school. I did some art classes here and there, but also I loved math and wanted to be a fashion designer, and ended up majoring in psychology when I went to college. And I still took a few drawing classes, and then went on to get my master's in art therapy counseling.
Nice.
So yeah, it was a wonderful path. I think I never quite knew how to get from the 5-year-old putting 5 cents on her paper to someone who could make art that people wanted, or that I could sell. And I think the internet has been kind of a way to make that possible, in a way that I think felt accessible to me, and helped my art be accessible to other people.
I love that.
Thank you.
So your career's taken, a few different twists and turns. How did you end up with the 100 Angel series? Where did the idea come from?
Well, I had painted, I made jewelry, and I sold things here and there, and got to a point where I felt like what I was wanting from my art was not happening. And so I decided, I had watched, I think it was a TED Talk about an artist who did 1,000 pieces, and she started emailing them $1, $2, $3, like each one.
Was that the Joe Gillibo talk?
Yes, and I may have seen it through some work that you shared. And so she did 1,000, right? Mm-hmm. And I thought, there's no way I can do 1,000. it just felt so daunting. But I thought, I can commit. My art is meaningful to me, and so I felt like if I wasn't connecting with an audience, that I would commit to my art for myself. And so I just thought about who I am and things that I enjoy. So angels, tutus, sort of having some fun. But I also, in terms of the math piece of me, I'm always curious about creating images that people can see, sort of like the lowest common denominator. So what are the fewest shapes that you can create that people can still see an image? And I don't think I've accomplished the fewest shapes per se, but just really playing with that idea of not sort of over creating the faces. Although some of my other work is almost the other extreme, but so I just decided essentially with the angels that I was going to do this work for myself, and I would do 100 because I could manage 100. Mm-hmm. And about 5 angels in, I got a message, hey, are these for sale? Sure, yeah, they are. And I kind of picked a number and went with it. Then I bumped that number up a little bit about halfway through and then bumped it up again for the second iteration of the series.
Nice. Nice.
Yeah.
Congratulations. That's awesome. That
Thank
sounds
you.
like a great catapult to other success.
Thank you.
Nice. So on your blog and in your work, you obviously you're Black, and a lot of your subjects are Black and stuff. And in one of your blog posts, maybe it was your About page, you said that you make art and you talk about what it's like to be in a Black body.
Yes.
What does that mean? What does that mean to you?
So I've been thinking about this. To me, it means a few things. One, it's sort of just who I was born, you know, but then there's also this kind of reality that when you're, it's my context. And in my context, I might enter a room and people may have questions, they may notice, they may make jokes, they may have, you know, thoughts. Like if I'm talking about family, I've had people say, oh, I thought your people are matriarchal. Or you walk into a store and someone says something awful. You know, I've had these experiences where existing in a Black body for me means stepping into a space and people interact with me based on what they experience and what they see, maybe what they think they know. But then there's also what I would say is kind of the poetry of just growing up, having dance contests, listening to Motown music, you know, and Marvin Gaye after the house was all clean and the lights were dim. And, you know, as an adult, having family over and playing the Commodores or Earth, Wind and Fire, you know, while my husband's grilling. And so there's a poetry, there's a home also that it's just my experience, and it is something that I feel I love, I'm proud of, and feel compelled to tell my stories, my experience in a way that's true and that reflects.
Why do you think it's so important for you to tell stories unique to you? Because your art looks different from most artists' work, right?
Yeah.
So why is it so important for you to tell those stories?
You know, for a lot of reasons. There's love, there's joy, there's rage, there's stop saying these things that are not accurate, you know. And to your point about the angels, there's this sort of fun quality to them, but there's also this kind of the words I use, the descriptions, I try to sort of encapsulate it all, you know. I was just recalling this story when I was a young girl, and I used to watch like Lifestyles of the Rich and Famous and all those kind of
Sure, yeah. We all did, yeah.
And there was this infomercial, and I don't know what they were selling, but they were showing different women and how, and they were majority white women, and how they look good in red and pink and lavender, and then they brought out two Black women and said, and Black women look good in blue and orange. I was like 8 years old, but I was livid, right? I thought this is not the case because I look fantastic in turquoise. I'm in pink right now, you know? And so I think I've always had this determination to, well, my mom would probably say I'm just stubborn, but I think I've always had this compulsion to disrupt and say, no, I won't allow you to erase me, to define me, or to name me. And I feel that work is as important now as ever.
Nice. So you mentioned like, so do the colors in your work, like do you show these angels in other colors besides blue and orange?
Yeah. You know, I use a lot more pink actually in my work than I ever engage with in my life for some reason, but it feels, it just feels right, and I don't really question that, you know. I just kind of go with whatever color, I call it craving, whatever color I'm craving, I go with it. But yes, I do. My angels are way beyond blue and orange.
And you mentioned like how do I say this question? Like, maybe we'll come back to this. So you mentioned in your bio that, okay, here's how I want to answer this question, or ask this question rather. Most of your work, it sounds like most of your work you're selling online. Is that right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yes.
So then the people that you're selling to, are they, who are those people?
That's a great question. There are many that I don't know, but there are quite a few who are Black women who resonate with the work, the messages, seeing themselves as little girls. I have many times had people say that their inner little girl never got to see themselves represented this way. And so it's sort of like giving them a piece of themselves that they never got to fully explore or to embrace. Quite a few white women who support my work and my message and also resonate with the images, maybe not necessarily obviously as a little Black girl, but the message, the heart, the spirit and the heart of it, they still resonate with. Every once in a while, I don't know, honestly, maybe not even every once in a while. Sometimes men buy my work, but not frequently.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
which is fine.
I mean, everybody likes what they like or whatever. And the art industry in general is predominantly run by people who look like me. They're white men, right? And I really love hearing perspectives of people who don't look like me in this industry. And I'd love to hear, what's it like for you to be participating in this industry as somebody who doesn't look like the predominant person in the art world.
Right. In some ways, I've had to insulate myself and focus on my voice and my work and connecting with my audience, because I think, like, to your point, I was in higher ed and in a past life, and at some point when you're reaching for the maybe upper levels, many industries become white male dominated, and you either have to play that game or create your own. And in many ways, I feel very focused on creating my own space, because I just don't think those spaces are sort of naturally made for me. Now, if I like in this instance where I'm invited in and I feel that it's a affirmative and positive and supportive environment, then I'm here. I show up, and I'm pleased and honored to do it. Otherwise, I focus my whole heart and my whole mind on creating my own space. And like Shirley Chisholm said, you bring your folding chair. If there's not a seat at the table, I'm always prepared with my folding chair.
I love that. So bring a folding chair. There's not a seat at the table. So if people don't go out of their way to invite you in, then obviously you have to create your own place you have to find your people and create your own place for them to be. For those who maybe want to change the status quo or want to invite people of color into the conversation or invite them to have a seat at the table, what's a good way to do that? Because I'll just, for you may know where I'm coming from, but for those who are listening, in my journey in understanding how I interact with minorities and other groups, it took me some time to understand that it is my responsibility as a person who benefits from power and benefits from just being who I am. It is my responsibility to create room and to create a seat at the table for those who have been excluded. And that looks like anything from literally just making a seat at the table for somebody to come and have lunch with me and my friends, up to maybe something like this, where inviting you on to our podcast to talk about art, to a variety of other things. So if I am feeling awkward about that and don't know how to make space, do you have any thoughts or suggestions?
Yeah, I think you do it anyway. I think that to your point, you use your platform and you use the opportunities you have to reach out to people. I think that, anytime that you can create space for people to be heard, that's important. It's huge. I think where you put your time and your money is huge. So creating a seat at the table for myself was so important, but, and I should say, I don't say reaching back, reaching across, reaching up, reaching back, wherever I can support another person, wherever I can put some dollars behind my articulated support is always important, because, power is as much about your presence, who you show up as well as what you have access to. So, I have a current set of stickers that I want to donate 10% of those proceeds to a bailout action. It's all about addressing the criminal legal justice system. And to me, those kind of things are important. So if you feel awkward, I say do it anyway. Reach out. If people respond to you and say, hey, I can give you an example. I've had someone reach out with probably the best of intentions, that I want to try to create this diverse pool of artists, let's say. But the ask is about the diversity, but there's not like an attempt to get to know me. And there's the level of commitment exceeds our level of relationship, then maybe step back and build relationship first, right? And so asking some questions, asking what that person is interested in, maybe following their work, but to sort of pull a person by the arm and say, hey, aren't you lucky? I'm interested in you, does not quite work either. And that's part of the awkwardness, though. But what can help is if, like in this instance, I said, hey, this is how this your outreach felt to me. Let's take a step back. Then you honor that, you hear that, you feel your feelings, and you move forward in that commitment, right? And
can I ask you? I just want to. I want to, just so that I understand what you're saying. So the difference between what is the difference between this outreach that you're talking about and like I just reached out to you out of nowhere and said, hey, do you want to come be on my podcast?
Right.
So why is this different than this other person asking you to be included in an art group?
That's a great question. Part of it is because I saw your question when you asked it. I follow you. So there was a sense, even though I was sort of new to you, I knew who you were. So that's probably part of it. And I've also seen you kind of pop up in some important conversations to me. So I felt like it was for real and not just maybe to check a box off of your to-do list. So that part of that is my own sort of awareness, but also because the level of entanglement, right? So if you're asking me to put forth a whole lot of time, a whole lot of energy, and to connect with people to promote your work in a way that doesn't really feel like it's benefiting me, but it really feels like it makes you look a certain way, that's where the question comes. So let me make it clearer. So if you're doing, let's say this talk was not just an interview, but it was like an artist workshop. Mm-hmm. And by me promoting it, you gain an audience, you may boost your income, you may boost your presence, And what I get out of it is that people got to see my face. That doesn't feel like an equal exchange, especially without relationship.
Right.
If we have relationship, I might say, oh my gosh, that sounds amazing. I'm there. But if there's no relationship and you get that much from me and I don't feel like you've put much into me as a person, as a fellow artist, then it feels more like it just doesn't feel as sincere. Even if it's intended to be sincere,
yeah,
there's just a bit more relationship that could be built before you sort of entangle people time-wise and financially in a way that they may not bounce back from, whereas you'll be fine.
Right. So this happens to artists of all varieties a lot. Like people will ask an artist to donate a piece of art or to participate in some project where payment for the artist is exposure. Right. And then the person making the ask is either going to benefit financially or, the public at large will benefit financially. This happens with public art. Cities and governments and stuff will ask artists to make work without paying them. Mm-hmm. So yeah, like that, I can obviously that's a problem, and I can see where when it comes to one group asking, like a group in power asking another disenfranchised group or a minority group to do that adds another layer of complexity to the problem.
Yes. Yeah, that's really beautifully stated. Yeah.
So you have created these angels who are, Black girls. So, and then you mentioned that the people who are buying your work, like some of the Black women who are buying your work, purchased it because they don't see that representation in other places. Mm-hmm. So what does it mean to you to see Black women represented in art? Outside of your own work.
Okay. I can go there. Outside of my own work. It feels like a lot of things. It feels like hope. It feels like when the representations are interesting and authentic, it feels like I exist, like people see me. I've seen some really lovely art that doesn't always come across as being seen, right? So like if every time a person paints Black women, it's about power and courage, to me, I feel like that's a piece of what it means to be a Black woman, given our social context, but it's not the whole picture. And so I can sometimes find that frustrating depending on who it's coming from. But when I see Black women represented, particularly in a variety of styles and settings, and when I see, I don't know, it just feels like being seen. It feels like you're valued, and I think that's some work. It takes work to see that, because our culture, our society really presents white as neutral, and it takes some time to develop this understanding that that's not the case. That being human is not being white, although being white is being human. You know what I mean? It's not like there are many ways to be human. And so when you see yourself represented, it's sort of like being seen, being understood, being valued in ways that you don't always experience in many other settings.
Right. So there's I love television. And in television, there's like a stereotype of the strong Black woman. And she's usually like a single mom with a couple of kids. And she's like loud and aggressive and, doesn't take any nonsense, that kind of stuff. But I rarely see a Black woman depicted otherwise.
Right.
Is that what you're talking about?
Exactly. Yes. And that, yes. And I don't want to disparage the strong Black woman who doesn't take any nonsense, because she too exists, but she is not all of us. And that stereotype is not often presented in a way to say, let's love her, let's elevate her, let's nurture her. Right. That stereotype is often held out there to prop up and continue the status quo.
Yeah. Yeah, it's a stereotype that exists to serve the story or to serve someone else's story.
Yes, yes.
Okay, interesting. So are there any artists who are representing Black women or people of color in a way that you think is interesting?
Yes.
Okay, let's hear it.
So, there are a couple of women who I simply adore. Jennifer Albin, who actually is a Latina, but does beautiful, beautiful work around just really deeply heartfelt work. Anne Clyde is another friend of mine whose work touches me. There's just such a heart and a warmth and a soul and a glow to her work. There's some women on Instagram, but you know what I wanted to say before I go further, there was a Twitter hashtag, drawing while Black, and oh my goodness, I mean, you could literally look at that hashtag and be blown away by the number of artists, Black women artists, some of these 16-year-old artists who make me think, oh, why am I even showing my work? They're brilliant. So I would recommend checking out that hashtag, drawing while Black. There's another artist, I think her Instagram is Yellow Rose Art. Her art is just stunning and beautiful, and there's this storybook quality, but also, I don't know, just really stunning. And Mystele, Mystele, I think, is another artist who just knocks me off my socks. And I have to admit, I feel super guilty right now because there's probably like 10 other people who I should be remembering. But those are just off the top of my head. Well, and there's one artist I wanted to mention, and I think it's Missimi is her name. So why? I'm sorry.
No, I love that you, like, I was like, I wasn't sure if you're going to have any recommendations, and you just rattled off like 6 or something. And then you have, the hashtag to go look at. So drawing while Black, that's awesome. I'm going to go check that out. There are, like, I am somebody who, my personality loves new things, right? So I love to see things I haven't seen before. I love to see stuff that is new to me, that shows me the world in a way that I haven't experienced before. And so I'm super excited to go check all that out. Like yesterday, I was at church, and I'm a Mormon, and Mormons, especially in America, are very white. As a group, we're very white. But last night at a meeting, there was a 16-year-old boy who is deaf. And he gave a talk at church last night. And it wasn't super long. It was like 15, 20 minutes. But just the experience of watching a deaf person give a talk at church was so unusual that I noticed that it arrested everybody in the room. The chapel was full. There were probably 500-600 people in there, and it was dead quiet, and everybody paid such close attention, partially because, it's silent as he's signing, and then the interpreter has to talk. But that experience, in addition to being new, just he has the experience, like he's gone through multiple heart surgeries, and he talked a little bit about being deaf in the church, and just those experiences were so new, and it made me think and reflect. So I think I really love seeing all this stuff that I don't see in my day-to-day life. So I'm excited to go check these out.
Okay, wonderful.
Yeah.
Glad to hear
I sound way too self-congratulatory. Okay. So tell me about like, you have a new piece called Cold-Blooded. And
that.
in the blog post, you know, this is different than your Angel series. It's a different kind of work. Um, where did that come from? Because you, in the series, or in the blog post, you talk about African American Vernacular English, which I think is like an academic way of saying the way Black people talk. Yeah. Yeah. So tell me about the inspiration for Cold-Blooded.
Okay, yeah. So Cold-Blooded is actually the second of a series that I'm still trying to work through in my own mind. I actually think I'm overthinking it, but I'll get through it. I'll get past it. But it is to honor African American Vernacular English, and that is the academic term. And it came from, I was listening to the radio. So to your point about liking television, I love television. I love radio. I'm sort of a pop culture kind of a person. I like what's new and what's interesting. And there was a website being advertised, and I don't want to say the name of it, but it used a common term that I would say amongst friends, you know, as a kid, as a girl, and even now, right? So let's say it was girl.com, and it's like girl, you know, I say it all the time. But if I were to say that as a Black woman, and something that many Black people grow up understanding, is that you're not safe to talk in ways that are informal or comfortable in every setting, because people will think that you're ignorant, that you're not educated, or you know, any number of negative thoughts. And so you learn, there's a term for it, but you learn to code switch. You learn how to communicate and present yourself in a certain way in mixed company or predominantly white environments. And then you learn how to sort of let go and just talk, you know, when you're with people with whom you are safe. So when I heard this website, I kind of thought, as I said, my work is like motivated, equal parts love, joy, and rage, right? I was kind of ticked off about it, because I felt like here my whole life I've kind of become kind of bilingual, if you will, and code switching. And then this website just kind of snatched a word that is certainly associated with Black people and turned it into something else. And I felt like I wanted to play with sort of honoring Black ways of communicating through fine art work. And cold-blooded is something my uncle used to say, and he passed away in April. And he knew that I was making the piece, which is sort of cool, but I was hoping that I could get it done before he passed on. But cold-blooded is, my uncle would say, like if he was impressed with something, he'd say cold-blooded. If he thought something was crazy, cold-blooded. He had a way to say it, and you knew how he felt about whatever you were telling him. And I just wanted to express the beauty of that language, and I wanted to honor it, and I wanted to honor Black people who've been made to feel like the ways that we talk that are comfortable are less than. And I also wanted to sort of assert some level of ownership, insert sort of a marker of moments and of words in time to say, you know, if this word, or if this way of communicating is going to be pulled out and dragged all across the universe to be used however you want it, I want it to be remembered for where it came from. And so Cold-Blooded is a piece of that series of marking a language and honoring African American Vernacular English, and preserving that language, preserving our language that is often taken from us because we're not safe to use it. So,
Not safe to use it. What was that? You talked about this a little bit a second ago. What does it mean that you can't use African American Vernacular English in everyday life? And I think this might seem like an obvious question, but like I grew up in a trailer park. I grew up redneck, and certainly I would get made fun of if I spoke like the way that I spoke in the trailer park was different than the way that I spoke among like at school, right?
Yeah. Right.
So is there a difference between that and what you're talking about?
In some ways, there are some common threads because it's true that where you come from and how you communicate, particularly if you come from poor or rural or urban areas, there's going to be some expectation to formalize your language, right?
Mm-hmm.
And at the same time, it becomes a little bit different when so let's say like you go girl, right? That's like from what I recall, like a Martin Lawrence thing.
Uh-huh.
Well, if I were to say that you go, and sort of communicate it in this way in across settings, it might be assumed that I'm not necessarily as intelligent as I am. If I'm looking at career opportunities, that maybe I'm not prepared career-wise. However, if a white person were to use that same language in that same setting, they might be seen as grounded, a person of the people.
Okay.
See, and so that's where it becomes a little bit different. The lack of safety can be just in that you might lose opportunity, you might be treated unfairly, to sometimes people who are a little, not a little, the people who act out violently, that there's a spectrum of safety that we forfeit. Forfeit is not the right word. It's just not as safe to sort of let it go. Now, some people will say, hey, listen, I'm going to be who I am. I'm not saying that lack of safety means that you can't make a different decision, but there is a sense of risk in doing so.
Interesting. So you talked a couple times online about Colin Kaepernick. Mm-hmm. Right. And for those who don't know, Colin Kaepernick is a football player in the National Football League. He was the quarterback of the San Francisco 49ers. Last season, he started kneeling during the national anthem as a form of protest against what was happening in communities of color. From my perspective, he puts his money where his mouth is. He started a training program for youth to help them do better, have better career opportunities. He donates to charities that do good works. He's not just taking a knee. He's actually doing a lot of different stuff. But he's essentially been blacklisted from the NFL. So then I saw your post about Colin, and it made me think, okay, well, why is an artist talking about a football player? One, so let's let's start there. Why is an artist talking about a football player?
That's funny. I don't know. I hadn't even thought about it that way. Probably because I grew up watching football with my dad. I don't watch it so much anymore, but my husband loves football and my son watches it sometimes. And so we watch together now and again, or he watches with buddies. So my world is aware of sports. I've got sports people in my life, and there's some sports I enjoy. I can kind of come in and out, but it's just probably the world that I'm a part of, and I think it's really interesting and important what Colin Kaepernick has done and is doing, obviously because he gave up a lot to take a stance, and it's an interesting process to watch. To your point, for him to not be picked up by a team, and this be the reason. So when you exercise your right to protest and have this consequence, it's just, it's something I didn't feel like I could ignore, but it's interesting that you thought about it that way. I guess there are artists who are just kind of doing their thing either way.
Yeah. I just remember in college, like, I enjoy watching football, but I remember in college when I was in a theater major, most of my classmates and fellow theater majors could not have cared less about college football. So that intersection was interesting. So, you know, Colin's out there protesting and really paying a pretty heavy price for what he's doing. Are there any artists in the art world that you're aware of who are doing similar things that we should be paying attention to? And if the answer is no, that's okay.
Okay, thanks. Because I don't know. I don't know. I think art kind of lends itself to protest, but I don't know beyond, you know, if there are people who are kind of risking it all for their creative expression, especially in this context of protest.
Yeah. Yeah. It's really interesting. I mean, you could argue maybe that Basquiat, towards the end of his career, before he passed away, was moving into that protest realm, you know, after his friend was shot by the police in New York.
That's true.
Yeah.
That's a really great point. I love Basquiat. Yeah.
And I just wonder who's going to take up that mantle, because you look at the top 100 best-selling artists in the world right now, and, you know, most of them are white men. A few of them are Chinese. I'm not sure that any of them are African American or any other American person of color.
Right.
Yeah, there's only 2 women.
I need to do some research on that, because I don't, like, I think because I've been a little bit more focused on where my heart is, I don't always keep an eye on the bigger picture.
Yeah. Especially
in the art world. I don't necessarily see myself as a part of the art world, and not that I have a particular angst. You know what I mean? It's not like a.
It's sort of irrelevant.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, that makes sense. And that happens with a lot of the artists that we have on this show. A lot of the artists that I work with, they are doing their own thing. They have clients that are very, you know, the collectors that are very happy and love their work. But the art world at large, like sort of what shows up in the news as the art world, is sort of irrelevant, because that's not how they make a living. So I appreciate that. You have a illustrated children's book coming out. Mm-hmm. Tell us about that. Yeah.
Sure. So I did one book last year called Not a Very Good Day at All. It was, so I knew I wanted to write a children's book, and I had a morning where I spilled sugar everywhere, and then I was running late to work, and I forgot my shoes. And I thought, I was telling the kids, I teach preschool, I'm an assistant teacher for 3 to 6 year olds. I was telling the kids in my class about this terrible day I was having. And I said, you guys, this is not a very good day at all. And I was doing it sort of to let them know. Oh, and I had made cookies, and I forgot my cookie for my lunch. So it was kind of a moment of frustration. And when you're with 3 to 6 year olds, you know, you can turn anything into a fun story. And I thought, this is the story. Jenny Serena Davis kind of came out of a really goofy day that I was having. And then all of these other stories came up. And so the next one is called I Must Find the Beads. And it's a story about Jenny stumbling upon a box of beautiful beads that happen to be right next to the do not touch basket. So they must be up for grabs. She spills them everywhere, and then finding them. And in this process, one thing I think is important again is representation. She's a little Black girl who is brilliant and funny and clumsy, and she makes mistakes. And also just as a kid in general, learning how to solve problems, maybe being able to look at things like they're not such a big deal, just here's how you fix a mistake you made. I think she speaks to the part of me that just kind of will never grow up, and she's fun to write. She gives me a little bit of a break from some of the heaviness,
Mm-hmm.
And so the next book is currently available for pre-order, and will be done in just about a week.
Nice. Well, congratulations. If people want to find out more about the book and about your work, where should they go?
They should go. My website is jenniferpricedavis.com. I have two Facebook pages for the 100 Angel series and Jennifer Price Davis Artist. And then Instagram is Jen P. Davis.
Nice.
Yeah.
Well, Jen, thank you so much for being on and talking about your work and your inspiration, for answering some tough questions. And I appreciate you taking the time.
I appreciate you having me. This was fantastic. And I don't know, it was wonderful. Thank you for having me. And I would love to talk more if you want to.
All right. We'll definitely be in touch. All right. Take care.
See ya.